Phase 5 leaks, Multiverse set up in the Marvels Plus. Let's see what kind of cool Julie has to say about this and check this out.
You know, I think this regulator is holding
Do
me back.
not screw with the regulator. If that regulator's compromised, you would go subatomic.
What does that mean?
It means that you would enter a quantum realm. It means that you would enter a reality where all concepts of time and space become irrelevant as you shrink from eternity.
Yo, what up, everyone? Tay here. Sorry for the big delay between videos. I had a bunch of stuff going on. I've been right in the middle of moving, and I was out of town for a while for the holidays. But I'm back now, and I got a long video for you guys with a lot of detailed theory talk. So let's get into it. But before I do, I should say in this video, to kind of set everything up, we are going to be talking about some of the recent plot leaks for Ant-Man Quantumania and also the Marvels, and a few plot leaks of stuff that's come out for Avengers Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. But I am not going to go through the entire plot leaks for any of these movies. I'm just going to talk about some key elements of those plots that seem to be directly tying into how those movies will set up Avengers Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. So this is your official spoiler warning. There will be spoilers, but I'm not going to spoil everything. So proceed how you will. And also, of course, if you're new to the channel and a fan of Marvel and the MCU, then please subscribe, because that is what we talk here in very in-depth and usually overly long videos. And also, if you'd like to support the channel, the best way to do that is by sharing the video. And then also stay till the end of the video for super thanks questions, because they're pretty overdue, but we do have some super thanks questions from the last video to get to. And also, if you would like to leave a super thanks question on this video, I will get to those in the next video, which, believe it or not, the next video is actually already finished. I've already got it done, so that will be out probably just like a day or two after this video. So it won't take forever. All right. Cool. Anyways, enough with all that stuff. Let's get into it.
It can rewrite existence and shatter timelines. You cannot trust him.
All right. So one of the big questions I've seen online lately that everyone seems to want answered is what's going on with the symbolism and the similarities and connections between Kang and the Celestials, and also stuff like Miss Marvel's bangle and the 10 rings and the Darkhold. And of course, I have a lot of theories on this topic that I have not yet talked about in any past videos, so I thought this would be a good time to just do a fun kind of theory video about all of that. But before we get into all the specific theory talk on those, first we have to set it up a little bit by talking about some of the plot leaks for Ant-Man Quantumania and the Marvels. So we are going to first cover the Ant-Man Quantumania leaks, and then we'll get to the Marvels, then we'll get to the theory talk. Okay, so according to the leaks for Ant-Man Quantumania, the reason Kang needs Scott's help in the movie is so Scott can shrink down and go to the center of the quantum realm, where the power core for Kang's ship has been recharging after Janet destroyed the original or hid the original. It's not exactly clear, but something like that. So Kang needs Scott to travel down further into the quantum realm and use his Pym particles to shrink that power core back down to a reasonable handheld size, and then bring it back to him so he can use it to power his time chair and his time ship, and finally escape from the quantum realm and go and conquer the multiverse. And according to this most recent leak that actually reveals a bunch of the closed captioning for the movie, in the movie, this power source is apparently referred to as the core to Kang's multiverse engine, and that this multiverse engine is what powers Kang's time chair and time ship. Now, this closed captioning leak was translated from a different language, so maybe that's the exact wording, or maybe the wording will be slightly different in the movie, but that's just what we have from that leak. And apparently, this multiversal energy source is so powerful that with it, Kang will not only have the ability to travel to any point in time, but also to travel to anywhere within the multiverse. And this all matches pretty exactly with what we've seen in the different trailers for Ant-Man Quantumania, where we see these scenes with Scott and Kang, and they look to be underneath Kang's Quantum City, which is most likely going to end up being Chronopolis. And we see him diving down into this quantum abyss and shrinking down further until he ends up to what some of the other leaks have referred to as the Quantum Nexus, or the center of the quantum realm. And this large Dyson sphere of spinning rings we've seen in the trailer is most likely the power core to Kang's multiverse engine that we were talking about, that's been described in those leaks, as we can see this moment where Scott is aiming at it as if he's trying to shrink it down with Pym particles. And you can see that on these rings of this power core, there's all of these different symbols etched into it that look very similar to stuff we've seen in the Eternals movie with the Celestials and their technology. Now, as we talked about in the last video when we were talking about Kang and the Avengers movies, Kang has most likely been stuck in the quantum realm since the last multiversal war occurred with He Who Remains. And according to the leaks, this whole time that Kang has been stuck in the quantum realm, he has been preparing for his escape by creating this large empire. And he's built his own city, which again is most likely Chronopolis. And he's also amassed a giant army that so far he has used to take over most of the territories within the quantum realm. And according to the most recent leak, once Kang gets his multiversal power core back, his plan is to not only escape the quantum realm himself, but also to take his entire city and army with him so he can use this city as basically a flying fortress from which to conquer the cosmos. And from everything we know about Ant-Man Quantumania, from what we've seen in the trailers and also the different plot leaks, it sounds like the main MacGuffin of the movie will end up being the power core for Kang's multiverse engine. And from the sounds of it, it looks like a lot of elements of this movie will be taking a lot of influence from the 1999 Avengers Forever comic run. And the main MacGuffin of that story is this massive source of chronal energy that powers Chronopolis called the Heart of Forever. And what happens in that story is Immortus sneaks into Chronopolis and finds the Heart of Forever underneath the city, and he then shrinks it down into this condensed form called the Forever Crystal so he can then steal it. And this sounds very similar to what we'll apparently see in Ant-Man Quantumania, where Scott has to travel beneath Kang's city to find this multiversal power source and then shrink it down into this condensed form so he can steal it and bring it back to Kang. So, this of course has me thinking that there's a good chance that this multiversal power core is basically going to end up being sort of like the MCU's version of the Heart of Forever, or the Forever Crystal from the comics. And this could be a potentially huge deal moving forward into the next two Avengers movies, because in the comics, the Forever Crystal was arguably way more powerful than the Infinity Gauntlet, because with the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones, they only work within their home universe, whereas the Forever Crystal has multiversal abilities to alter or erase entire timelines and realities, or different characters from those realities, or create new characters just out of existence. It has all of these crazy multiversal and time travel abilities. And if Kang got something like that in the MCU, he could possibly use it to cause something like a mass incursion that would erase every other universe in existence except for one, creating his own version of the sacred timeline and battle world. Or there could be all sorts of other possibilities. So what this could possibly end up being is sort of like Kang's version of the Infinity Gauntlet, as this omnipotent MacGuffin that gives Kang the ability to mess with time and the multiverse in any way he sees fit without there being any type of big repercussions. So yeah, just put that whole concept in your back pocket for now, and we'll kind of come back to that a little bit later when we get into the theory talk. But first, we have to move on and talk about these plot leaks for the Marvels and how they are setting up stuff for Avengers Kang Dynasty. So again, in this section, just like the last section, I'm not going to go through the entire plot leak for the Marvels. I'm just going to talk about the stuff that ties into setting up the next 2 Avengers movies. Okay, so, according to the leaks for the Marvels, the main MacGuffins of that movie are, of course, going to be the Bangles. Miss Marvel is going to have one, the same one she had before, and then the villain of the movie, Dar-Ben, is apparently going to have the other. Now, apparently, in the MCU, at some point after the events of the first Captain Marvel movie that took place back in the 90s, Captain Marvel returned to Hala to wage war on the Kree, and this ended with Carol defeating the Supreme Intelligence. And this is apparently something we will see moments of in a few flashback scenes in the Marvels movie. But what ends up happening is without the Supreme Intelligence there to run Hala, afterwards the planet fell into ruin and the Kree civilization came to view Captain Marvel as this great world destroyer. And according to these leaks, it's these events that are pivotal to setting up the plot of the Marvels movie and its villain, Dar-Ben. Because according to the leaks, Dar-Ben will be the new leader of the Kree who is working to try and get Hala back to its former glory in the universe. And it says that the way she is doing this is with the other bangle, and that she is using this bangle to power a device that is capable of opening portals in space to other planets, so she can then steal those planets' resources and divert them back to Hala to rebuild the planet and its atmosphere after Carol Danvers destroyed it, basically, by destroying the Supreme Intelligence. And this would seem to make sense because, as we saw at the end of Miss Marvel when Carol swapped places with Kamala, one of the bangle's powers is that it can be used to travel through space and open doorways and portals in space, kind of similar to what we saw with the Tesseract back in the Infinity Saga. But in the Marvels movie, ultimately what ends up happening, according to the leaks, is Dar-Ben using the bangle to open up all these portals in space ends up tearing a hole in the fabric of the universe and causes an incursion, or at least the beginning of an incursion. Now, we're going to talk more about the Bangles and their powers and where they come from and all of that in a minute, but the fact that the Bangles have this power to actually tear a hole between 2 universes would seem to suggest that the source of the Bangles' power is tied to the multiverse, as opposed to something like the Infinity Stones, where their power was more tied to just one universe. And apparently what happens towards the end of the Marvels movie when this incursion starts to take place is Monica Rambeau is able to fly into this tear between realities and close it from the other side. And when she does this, when she uses her powers to close this tear, this does end up stopping the incursion, but it also ends up leaving Monica stranded on the other side of this tear in this other universe. Now, of course, like I mentioned a second ago, there's a lot more to this plot leak than just that. This is just the stuff that is kind of pertinent to foreshadowing and setting up the next 2 Avengers movies. Because obviously with an incursion being introduced in the film, even though Monica is able to stop it, just that alone is likely going to have some big ramifications for what's going to happen in Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars, and possibly even other projects in Phase 5 and Phase 6 like the Fantastic Four movie. And then Monica ending the movie being stuck in this other universe could also have some huge implications for what happens next, because this other universe she is stuck in will likely end up being an important universe to what's happening in the overall multiverse saga, and this would provide Marvel Studios with a way for Monica to meet other characters in this universe and other heroes, and possibly recruit them for the war against Kang once we get to Avengers Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. I mean, this universe that Monica ends up in could be an important universe like maybe the MCU's version of the Ultimate Universe, or it could also end up being one of the Marvel Legacy universes like maybe the Fox X-Men universe. So yeah, it definitely sets up a lot of intriguing possibilities for what could happen in the future with the incursions and just other multiversal characters once we get to Avengers Secret Wars. But anyways, that's it for the leaks that we have to talk about for the Marvels and Ant-Man Quantumania. So now that we have discussed all of that, now let's move on and go deep into the rabbit hole of wild theory talk and speculation.
any artifacts from our codex?
Not like any alien tech I've seen. How long did your dad have them before he gave them to you?
About 1,000 years?
The thermoluminescence indicates they're older than that, by a lot.
A beacon.
They're sending a message.
A message to where?
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest MCU questions I've seen online lately is people wanting an explanation for what the connection could be between Kang and the Celestials and all these different MacGuffins we've seen throughout Phase 4 and will continue to see throughout Phase 5. And just real quick, if you don't know what a MacGuffin is a writing term for an object or a plot device that is used as a centerpiece of a story that serves to move the plot forward. And we've seen a few MacGuffins so far in Phase 4, like the Bloodstone in Werewolf by Night or Captain America's shield in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But the more important MacGuffins that I think will probably play a bigger role in the overall multiverse saga, like the Infinity Stones did in the Infinity Saga, include items like the Darkhold, the Ten Rings, and also Kamala Khan's bangle in Miss Marvel. And then besides that, we're also about to see the introduction of Kang's timeshare and his time ship, as well as this multiversal power core in Ant-Man Quantumania. And the way Marvel Studios have introduced objects like this, like the bangle and the Ten Rings, they have purposefully left an air of mystery around all of them that seems to be foreshadowing that they will play a bigger role in upcoming future projects. And a perfect example of this is the post-credit scene in Shang-Chi, where they teased the origins of the Ten Rings and that they were sending out a beacon to somewhere unknown. Now, it's possible that this loose plot thread is teasing the introduction of Fin Fang Foom for the Shang-Chi sequel. But there's also a strong possibility that it's not that, and that this is actually foreshadowing a bigger plot point for Avengers Kang Dynasty or Avengers Secret Wars. But then besides the Ten Rings, like I said, there's also the Darkhold and the Bangle, or Bangles, because we know there's actually going to be two of them. And we already talked about how the two Bangles are going to be the big MacGuffins of the Marvels. But then as far as the Darkhold goes, we also know that chaos magic is going to be a big focal element in Agatha Coven of Chaos, and that even though Wanda destroyed the Darkhold at the end of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, it's been reported that the concept and backstory of the Darkhold is still going to play a big role in the Agatha Coven of Chaos series, and that we will likely even see it return in some flashback scenes. Now, like I said, the main MacGuffins of the Infinity Saga were, of course, the Infinity Stones. And by there being 6 Infinity Stones, this allowed Marvel Studios to use individual stones as MacGuffins throughout all the movies in phases 1 through 3, but then also make it so they are all connected as a part of a larger whole when the stones came together in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And it seems like Marvel Studios may be doing something very similar to that in the Multiverse Saga, where we are going to see all of these different powerful artifacts that have been introduced throughout Phase 4 and Phase 5 that are actually all somehow connected as a larger whole of some kind. Now, unlike the Infinity Stones, it seems like Marvel Studios is keeping what exactly that connection is a mystery for a little while, and they probably won't reveal how all of these artifacts are connected until we get a little bit closer to Phase 6 and Avengers Kang Dynasty. Now, one of the big things that's been pointed out in Phase 4 is the correlation and similarities between these different symbols that we've been seeing in these different movies, and also the similarities between these different rings. And there's no doubt that the patterns that are etched into the 10 rings are almost identical to the patterns we see on the rings surrounding Kang's Quantum City. But then there's also a bunch of patterns that look very similar to the symbolism we saw in the Eternals that originated from the Celestials. Then there's also the symbols we saw in the Darkhold Castle in Doctor Strange 2, and then some other symbols we've seen in the trailers for Ant-Man Quantumania on Kang's time chair, and also on the core of the Multiverse engine, which is the big Dyson sphere of spinning rings that we were talking about in the first section. Now, as far as the symbols we've seen with the Darkhold and the Darkhold Castle, there are some similarities between some of those symbols and the symbols we've seen with Kang and in the Eternals movie. But then some of the other symbols we've seen with the Darkhold and in that castle don't really line up that well. You know, some of them are similar and some of them are not. So to me, the Darkhold connection may be a bit more inconclusive, at least for now. However, I should probably note that one of the recent rumors / leaks that's out right now and kind of making the rounds that came from Cosmic Circus is saying that the Darkhold still has a big role to play in the Multiverse saga, and that another Kang variant is going to be revealed as the one who first transcribed the Darkhold from Chthon's etchings. And if this turns out to be true, then the Darkhold could actually end up playing a pretty huge role moving forward. Because in the comics, one of the only beings that Kang has feared besides other versions of himself was the Scarlet Witch and her children, because he knew that they were Nexus beings that were capable of potentially defeating him. So in the comics, Immortus went to great lengths to mess with time and put certain things in motion in order to prevent Wanda from having children. And in the MCU, in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, it was revealed by Wong that the Scarlet Witch has been prophesied to become the ruler of the multiverse. And with Kang being this prolific time traveler, then it seems like he would definitely know about that he would definitely know about this prophecy saying that the Scarlet Witch is destined to rule the multiverse. So it would make sense that just like in the comics, Kang would see the Scarlet Witch as the biggest threat to him and the biggest threat to him conquering the multiverse. So if this rumor about Kang and the Darkhold turns out to be true, then perhaps he or a variant of himself went back in time to learn about the Scarlet Witch as a way to defeat her. And this could have been what led to him becoming the author of the Darkhold. And I know that Wanda destroyed the Darkhold throughout the multiverse in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, but with Kang being a time traveler and having this ability to travel back in time, he could always just travel back in time to before that and, you know, find Darkhold spells or whatever he needed to potentially stop Wanda. Because if anywhere there would be a key to how to stop Wanda, you would have to think that it would be in the Darkhold. But anyways, I'm kind of getting off track. So let's go back to talking about the connections between Miss Marvel's bangle and the 10 rings. Because we know there's likely going to be some kind of crossover revealed between these objects. Because in the Miss Marvel show, when the Clandestine recovered the bangle back in 1942, they find it in an old 10 Rings temple in India. Now, we already talked about how the bangles have the ability to open portals in space when we were talking about the leaks for the Marvels in the last section. But the most interesting ability we saw from the bangle in the Miss Marvel show was that it apparently has the power to let the wearer travel through time. And, you know, honestly, I thought the Miss Marvel show really went off the rails after the first 2 episodes. I thought the first 2 episodes were really good. It reminded me of, like, John Hughes and Spider-Man Homecoming. And I think that Ayman Vellani does a great job of playing Kamala Khan. But after the first 2 episodes, I thought this show was just horrible and just totally went off the rails. And I thought that whole time travel episode really convoluted the rules of time travel that had already been established in the MCU. But it did make me think that Marvel Studios must have included that whole time travel plot and aspect into that episode because they were using it to probably set up something to do with the bangle and time travel in the future. And the fact that the bangle has some kind of time travel abilities is definitely a strong indicator that the bangles also share a connection with the technology that Kang uses to travel through time, and that these artifacts are, you know, all connected. And I think the way the Bangle's time travel ability works in the MCU is it can only travel back in time to where the Bangle already existed in the past. Because in the episode, Kamala travels back in time to India in 1942 to when her great-grandmother was in possession of the Bangle at that time back then. So I don't think the Bangle can necessarily travel to any location in time. I think it has to be a location where the Bangle already existed at that point in the past, if that makes sense. Now, if someone had both Bangles, maybe it would be different or something like that. But at least the way it was portrayed in the show, that was the impression I got. And the official name of the Bangles have not been officially revealed yet. But it seems to me like they are basically a mix of the Negabands and the Quantum Bands from the comics. But especially the Negabands, because if you look at that leak for the Marvels and the connections to the Kree and the abilities they have with people swapping places and all that stuff, that's all stuff that comes from the Negabands. But there's also some similarities and powers that it has that's more similar to the Quantum Bands. However, even though the powers and abilities of the Bangles do lean more towards the Negabands, I wouldn't be surprised if in the MCU, the official name of the Bangles turns out to actually be the Quantum Bands as a way to connect the Bangles' power source to the Quantum Realm. Because I think the Quantum Realm might end up being kind of the key to this whole thing and what could possibly tie these artifacts all together. Because with this being the Multiverse Saga and Kang being this time-traveling villain, the Quantum Realm being the source of power that connects these artifacts that possibly have the power to defeat Kang would make a lot of sense to me. Because in the comics, the Quantum Bands draw their cosmic energy from a place called the Quantum Zone. So maybe it's kind of a similar concept in the MCU, where items like the Bangles and the 10 Rings, and also Kang's time technology, all draw their energy and power source from the Quantum Realm. Because according to the Ant-Man Quantumania leaks, Kang was actually banished into the Quantum Realm because it was the one place that his other variants knew could contain him, that he couldn't escape from. And the Quantumania leaks also said that Kang had to use the energy at the center of the Quantum Realm to recharge the power core for his multiverse engine. And it would make sense that any kind of time travel technology that would exist in the MCU would probably need to run off of some sort of quantum realm energy, since the quantum realm is how the Avengers were able to travel through time in Avengers Endgame, and that is how Marvel Studios really established the rules for time travel. So if Miss Marvel's bangle was to be powered by quantum energy, then that could also explain how Kamala Khan was able to use the bangle to travel back in time in the Miss Marvel show, and also why the bangle can open multiversal portals to other universes and dimensions like the Nor dimension. The same way that Kang's multiverse engine will allow him to travel through both time and the multiverse. Because like I mentioned a minute ago, in the past, Marvel Studios have openly talked about how they have big future plans for the quantum realm because it's a place that allows them to do so much with what's happening in their stories. And what they said exactly was that it's the source code for reality, and then they also said that through the quantum realm, anything is possible, including time travel and access to alternate dimensions. So if Kang has a multiverse engine that can time travel and go anywhere throughout the multiverse, then it makes sense that he would need to recharge the power core for that multiverse engine in the quantum realm, or the quantum nexus, or the center of the quantum realm, that area we've seen in the trailers. And with Ms. Marvel's bangles having that same ability, where we've seen it travel through time and open doorways into other dimensions, it makes sense to me that in the future we might find out that those bangles are drawing upon quantum energy. Now, as far as how the 10 rings could fit into all of this, that one's a little bit trickier, But like I said, it's undeniable that the patterns we see etched into the Ten Rings are almost identical to the patterns we see on the rings surrounding Kang's Quantum City in the trailers for Ant-Man Quantumania. However, some other things about the Ten Rings I think are worth noting is that we know that Wenwu discovered the rings over 1,000 years ago, and that while he had the rings, they were able to keep him young and from aging. And this could be kind of similar to Kang, because we know that Kang is able to use his time technology to keep himself from aging. So if Kang's time technology draws upon the quantum realm, and that is a part of what keeps him from aging, maybe there's a correlation with the Ten Rings and where they get their power from that kept Wenwu from aging. And then in the Shang-Chi movie, we also saw that the Ten Rings were capable of destroying the Dark Gate, which was an interdimensional barrier that kept the Dweller in Darkness from escaping and getting into Ta Lo. Which, that could be a little bit similar to the ability of the Bangles to open doorways to other dimensions, like we saw in Ms. Marvel, where we saw the Bangles open a portal into the Noor dimension. And another interesting detail about the Ten Rings is that Hydra and the Ten Rings organization were the ones who were buying the Yellow Jacket technology from Darren Cross back in the first Ant-Man movie. Now, this was back in 2015 when Wenwu would have still been the leader of the Ten Rings. And in Shang-Chi, it was revealed that Wenwu had the rings for over 1,000 years. So maybe during that time, he was trying to study the origin of the rings, and at some point he discovered they were connected to quantum energy, and that is why he was trying to purchase the Yellow Jacket technology back in 2015 to kind of further explore that. And this could also help explain why the bangle was discovered in a Ten Rings temple back in the 1940s in the Ms. Marvel show, because if the bangle is connected to quantum energy, maybe, Wenwu was collecting different artifacts and experimenting on them, trying to find this correlation, or, something like that. And if the Ten Rings and the Bangles are connected through the quantum realm as the source of their power, then maybe the Bangles and the Ten Rings can also interact and work with each other in some way. Kind of similar to how the Infinity Stones could both work separately, but were then way more powerful once they were brought together. Which, if this is the case, then this could be a key element in defeating Kang once we get to the next two Avengers movies. Now, if the Bangles and the Ten Rings are connected and do end up playing some bigger role in the next two Avengers movies, then chances are we are probably going to end up seeing a few other important artifacts or MacGuffins introduced throughout phases 5 and 6 that are also intertwined with those others, that are kind of connected into this bigger story as well. And throughout this video, while I've been talking about all of this, one of the things it actually made me think of was the life rafts that played a big role in both the Secret Wars comic storylines. Because these life rafts, which are basically giant spaceships, are actually very iconic parts of both the Secret Wars comic storylines. And in Jonathan Hickman's 2015 Secret Wars saga, Reed Richards and the Future Foundation created one of these giant ships to be a life raft that was capable of multiversal travel, mainly in case of an incursion coming and threatening the existence of the 616 universe. And ultimately, this did happen, and the incursion of the 616 and Ultimate universes destroyed what was left of the multiverse, and it was this life raft that took a small group of heroes to Battleworld. And the characters on this ship, like Reed Richards, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Star-Lord, Spider-Man, and a few others, those heroes ended up being some of the main characters in that 2015 Secret Wars story, as they were the only survivors from the 616 universe. And with these ships being such iconic parts of the Secret Wars comics, it seems to me, at least, like Marvel Studios will probably end up trying to adapt them into the Secret Wars movie in some way. Because according to one of the other leaks that dropped last month for Avengers Secret Wars, according to that, in the movie, we are going to see a small group of surviving heroes from the MCU 616 universe that end up fleeing into the multiverse so they can go and raise an army of multiversal characters to fight in their war against Kang. And to me, this sounded very similar to the concept in the 2015 Secret Wars comic, where there was that small group of heroes who survived the final incursion and then went on to try and save the 616 universe and reset the multiverse throughout the rest of the Secret Wars story. So if this leak about the Secret Wars movie does turn out to be true, then perhaps the way these surviving heroes will end up fleeing into the multiverse will be on one of these giant spacecrafts capable of multiversal travel that is modeled after the Reed Richards life raft that we saw in the Secret Wars comics. Which maybe we could even end up seeing Reed Richards building this life raft, building this big multiversal spaceship in the Fantastic Four movie. Now, again, of course, I'm just wildly speculating and, going through theory talk. But if something like this did turn out to be accurate, then this life raft could end up being one of the other big MacGuffins we could see as we approach the next two Avengers movies. And maybe the key to powering a ship like that could be some of the other MacGuffins and artifacts that we've been talking about in this video, like the bangles or the 10 rings. Because, like I mentioned already, we know that Miss Marvel's bangle was capable of time travel in the Miss Marvel series, as well as opening a doorway to the Noor dimension. And then, according to the leaks for the Marvels that we talked about a little bit earlier, in that movie, we are going to see the Kree villain, Dar-Ben, use the other bangle as a power source to fuel a device capable of opening these large portals in space, and that this device will end up causing an actual incursion to occur. So if these bangles are capable of actually causing an incursion, then that would seem to suggest that they are holding some serious multiversal power. So I could totally see something like the bangles acting as a power source for something like a big multiversal spaceship modeled after the life rafts from the Secret Wars comics once we eventually get to the Secret Wars movie. But again, this is just loose theory talk. I'm kind of, just speculating very loosely right now. So you guys let me know what you think, and please leave your own theories on all of this in the comments down below. But anyways, I think we should probably call it here for this video. I originally was going to talk about some other stuff in this video. I really wanted to get into the Celestials and talk more about the Scarlet Witch, and I've been really eager to talk about the recent leaks and rumors about the Beyonder in Avengers Secret Wars. But I just ran out of time on this one. I know a lot of you guys like the longer 60-minute videos, but I'm really trying to keep the videos more to like 35, 40 minutes tops. So I'm going to save that for one of the next videos, but I'm definitely going to cover it and cover it very soon because it's all stuff I'm very eager and excited to talk about. And also just one other reminder, I actually have another video that's already finished and ready to go that's going to be talking more about the street level MCU, mutants, and the Thunderbolts. So yeah, I know normally I don't post back-to-back videos, but this time I am going to. So keep an eye out for that video, probably coming out tomorrow. And then actually there is one other thing before we go. We still have super thanks and super thanks questions to get to from the last video. And the questions we got in these super thanks all tie into stuff having to do with Avengers Secret Wars. So it's all stuff that ties in pretty well with what we've already been talking about. So before we go, let's get into these super thanks questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alright, let's get into these. Okay, so I think we have 6 total, and the first 3 don't have questions. They are just super thanks. We have one from Blackfire Warrior. Thank you very much. As always, Blackfire Warrior, you're always awesome leaving these super thanks. Then we also have one just saying thank you from Paul Sanford. Thank you very much, Paul. Also a regular. Then we have a $5 one from Chris. I'm not going to try to say your last name, Chris, because I don't know how to pronounce it, but thank you very much, man. Much appreciated. And then we have 3 more that do have questions. So the first one is $10 from Dave. and it says, do you think it's going to be Earth 616 versus Earth 838, Sony and Fox universe? Also curious to know who is warning Loki about the different types of Kangs in the Wall of Faces. Thanks. Okay, so my last video, what these super thanks were left on, was all about Secret Wars and Kang and Loki Season 2, so I think all of these questions kind of are related to that, are Secret Wars related questions. So as far as this question goes, I don't know what you mean by the Sony and Fox universe, because the 838 universe was the universe we saw in Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, but I do think that the Sony and Fox universes, or characters from those universes, are definitely going to show up in Secret Wars. But as far as the 838 universe goes and the multiversal war, if they adapt that element from Secret Wars issue number 1, where we see the 616 universe go to war with the Ultimate Universe, it could be any number of universes that are introduced into the MCU by that point, because I'm sure by the time we get to Avengers 5 and Avengers 6, there will have been several other universes from the multiverse we've seen explored, not just the 838 universe. But the 838 universe is definitely a possibility. Maybe it could also be the Fox universe. But what I'm hoping it will be is that at some point before Avengers 5 or Avengers 6 is we will see the MCU version of the Ultimate Universe introduced, and that we will see that universe go to war with the 616 universe. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens. And then as far as Loki and who warned him, I'm guessing that no one's warned him, and this is all just stuff he's figured out after talking with He Who Remains at the end of Loki Season 1, and then going back in time or to the other reality version of the TVA. But it's hard to say for sure because we haven't seen an actual official trailer for Loki Season 2 yet. There's just that leaked version. So yeah, but thank you very much for that super thanks and that question, Dave. Then we have another question from Matthew Templeton, and it says, love the channel, good sir, awesome channel, great job. Here's my question, do you think all the variants will have the same fingerprints, the same allergies? Okay, thanks for that question. And I would have to say probably no, because we know that variants across the multiverse can look the same, but oftentimes they have different faces or look totally different. So if they can have different faces, I would assume they probably have different fingerprints. That's just a guess, but makes sense to me. But anyways, thank you very much for that. And then we have one last question from Lavery Adam, and it says, how would you explain Janet aging? And this is a great question that is in response to stuff we talked about in the last video about Kang being stuck in the quantum realm since the last multiverse existed, and the possibility that he hasn't aged because time passes differently in the quantum realm. And one possibility for Kang not aging, if this is correct, is that he could have some technology that stops him from aging like he has in the comics, or another possibility is he has reached the center of time, an area of the quantum realm where time doesn't pass, or passes differently, and that after Janet separated from Kang in the quantum realm, she went to explore different areas where time did affect her. That would be my best guess, just based, trying to sum it up very quickly. I could expand on it more if I had more time, but that would be my best guess at this point in time. But that is a great question I didn't think to mention in the last video. But anyways, I think that's it. Thank you so much, you guys, for the super thanks, and don't forget, if you want to leave a super thanks comment on this video, I will answer it in the next video. But I really do appreciate you guys so much. And if you guys liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And also, share the video if you liked it. That's the best way to support the channel. And don't forget to come follow the channel on Twitter, because that's the best place for channel updates, or just to come talk about nerdy comic book stuff. And if you missed any other recent videos, you can find those linked in the description down below. Anyways, alright, cool. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will be back soon.
Yeah, have a great night. Please like this video, and see you guys. Bye.